Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. Of course, when you're buying a home, you want to make sure your finances are in order before you start looking. The last thing you want to do, find a home, fall in love with it, and then be told you can't afford it. Steve Farenthal is a mortgage banker with Brand Mortgage Company. Steve, thanks for being with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, listen, I'm a client, right? I want to go out there and I want to buy a house. What's kind of the first thing that I need to do to get sort of lined up in order to get pre-approved for a loan?
Well, I think you need to start off with a budget and decide, how much do you want your mortgage payment to be. Nobody wants to be house poor. And then with that, you also need to look to see, nowadays, you do have to put a down payment down. It's not 100% financing for the most part. So how much do you want to pull out of savings as a down payment? That would be the first two items.
All right, so let's say first-time home buyer, right?
Yep.
There are FHA loans out there, aren't there?
Yes.
There are available. Where you put how much percent you got to put down on a loan? Maybe 5%, 3 to 5%?
3.5%.
Is there a max piece of property? Are we talking like 200,000, 300,000, where the FHA loan doesn't qualify anymore? You need to put more money down.
346,250 is the maximum loan
cutoff
for FHA.
Is the FHA cutoff.
Yes.
But you advise people to kind of go in almost like you could say buying a car, saying, you know what, this is how much money I make, this is how much money I bring in. I can afford a $300 a month car payment, right? You're saying kind of use that same approach maybe for even buying a house. I can afford a $1,500 a month mortgage.
Right.
And then kind of go in, because I got to be honest with you, I was in the market back in 2006, and I went to a bank, and they pre-approved me for a $900,000 home. And I look back now, I would have been out of that house in a year.
Well, and you're absolutely right. I mean, what's happened recently in the business is they've, especially with a conventional loan, is they've lowered the maximum debt-to-income ratios. FHA, they really haven't. You can still go up to a pretty high debt-to-income ratio on an FHA, which really puts someone in a position where they can qualify for a lot more house than what they really should be.
Yeah, because you're talking about a
346.
So about $350,000 home,
right?
Putting 3 to 5% down,
right? At
an interest rate that's one of the lowest we've seen
Absolutely.
in our lifetime.
Yeah, on something like that, interest rates as low as 3.75%, APR around 4.5%.
All right. So what are some of the other considerations? I go in, I get my loan from you. What are some of the other costs that I'm going to incur kind of when I go in to buy my first house?
That's probably the main reason why somebody should do a pre-approval, because the lender can give you a complete overview. It's not all just about the payment. You want to make sure that fits in your budget. But let's just say we have a $200,000 house and it's an FHA loan. So the down payment would be $7,000. Some people think, okay, well, that's all I need to have. But you got to consider that there are closing costs, and you also have to consider that there's prepaids, which is setting up your escrow account for property taxes and homeowners insurance.
What are we looking at there? School me. Closing costs on a $200,000 home these days. What is it going to run me?
1.5% to 2%. It just depends. So there's lots of ways to structure a transaction, whether there's an origination fee or not an origination fee. The prepaids are going to be what they are. I mean, taxes are, in that situation, they're probably going to be $3,000, this time of year. They go up as we get later into the year because most taxes are due towards the end of the year. So you might have as much as $7,000 in closing costs and prepaids. And if you go to a lender ahead of time, they'll do a scenario and break it all down so you can understand what I'm going to really have to have, or the seller oftentimes is going to pay a portion of those closing costs and prepaid items. So if they're willing to pay $7,000, then that customer actually will only have their down payment into the transaction.
Is it easier for me to get a loan, or is there anything I have to be cautious about going to get a loan for, let's say, if I'm going to go buy a foreclosure? Is it riskier for a bank to give me money to go buy a foreclosure than it is new construction or a new building or a new home?
No.
No.
We're qualifying you, not the house.
Got it.
The appraiser or inspector is going to go out there, and they're going to make sure that the house is okay, that there's a certificate of occupancy for it. So we're really qualifying you. Do you qualify for the mortgage?
Are you seeing more people qualify for FHA loans now than you are just somebody coming in asking for a 10 or 20% or an 80% loan?
There's definitely been
What are you seeing more of? Are you seeing?
There's a lot more FHA loans that are happening right now, although conventionally it gets very complicated because you could do really as little as 3% down on a conventional. Typically it's 5%. And there's some great conventional programs, but again, it has to do with your debt to income. They've lowered the maximum allowable debt to income ratios. So if you qualify for it, it's a great program.
All right, very good. Steve Farenthal, thank you very much for your time this morning. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, when we come back, more on the housing crisis. New home sales, yes, they are doing well. What buyers are now looking for and what kind of deal you can get on new construction. Well, more on that when we come back.